Compound interest. Imagine you make an investment of $1,000 with 5% interest annually for 10 years. After 1 year, you would have earned, and we can just do this calculation here, I equals PRT would be I equals $1,000 times R, which is 0.05 times 1 year. If you run through that calculation, you get that after 1 year, you would have earned $50 in interest. But after 1 year, you could theoretically, if you had accessed that money, reinvest it. If that money stays in your account, then really what you now have is $1,050 in total. So with compound interest, in the second year, you would earn, based on this new principle, $1,050 times 0.5 times 1, which would actually be equal to $52.50. And in the third year, you'd be beginning with $1,102.50. So at the end of year 2, your account now has $1,102.50. This is different than if you paid simple interest. Compared to $1,100 for simple interest. So that extra $2.50, that is 5% interest earned on the $50 from year 1's interest. So what compound interest does is it earns interest on previous interest. Now $2.50 doesn't seem like much, so really is compound interest that much better than simple interest? But what we're going to see is that the longer an investment stays, the more and more significant these compounding effects become. So compound interest periodically turns interest into principal. So it reinvests that interest that's been earned back into the principal so that now that principal is higher and the interest is calculated based on that new higher principal. And this period, how often this happens, can happen at all kinds of different amounts. In the previous example, the interest was compounded every year, but interest can also be compounded more often than that. So there's a few key words. Let's try to get these all sorted out. So annually, so there's two N's, whoops, annually, that means that the interest would be compounded once per year. Semi-annually means twice per year. Quarterly means 4 times per year, breaking the year up into quarters. Monthly is obviously once per month. Weekly is once per week. Semi-weekly, or sorry, no, every 2 weeks is what we call bi-weekly. And this is how a lot of paychecks come out. Paychecks are often bi-weekly. And then there's daily if interest is compounded every day. So there's some vocab you need to be ready for. You might be told that compound interest is is compounded weekly or bi-weekly or semi-annually, and you need to be ready to figure out how often that means. Before we get into the calculations, I want to show you a couple of examples. So I've graphed out for you two graphs. One, simple interest, which is in red. So this is $1,000 invested at 5% per year over 10 years. And compound interest, which is the same investment with the same interest rate, only we reinvest that interest into the principal annually, so once per year. So at the beginning, both investments start at the same amount, $1,000. And after even 2 or 3 years, they don't look that different. But as in the blue case, as that interest gets reinvested into the account, into the principal, and what it means is that you get more and more interest as that principal rises with each calculation. After 10 years, the simple interest is worth a total of $1,500, and the compounded interest is worth $1,628.89. So the compounded investment would have made an extra $100.28. Or sorry, $128.89. Again, doesn't look super significant here, but I want to show you some variations on this now. Keeping the same initial investment, but stretching that investment out to be over 30 years, I want you to see what happens. So these black dots you can see here on the graph, that was what we had in the previous example. So this was about $1,600 or $1,628, and in red it was $1,500 after 10 years. Well, as you can see, that as this interest gets compounded, the compound interest investment really starts to take off. This simple interest investment, it never grows beyond that interest on $1,000. And so even after 30 years, it's made $2,500. But for example, if we look at the compound interest line, as that interest is reinvested into the principal of the investment, well, at the 18-year mark, the compound interest investment is now actually worth $2,500, the amount that the simple interest loan would be worth at the end of 30 years. And it just continues to take off until after 30 years, that $1,000 investment is worth $4,321.94. So that $1,000 investment has quadrupled into more than $4,000. And for one last comparison, I wanted to add in this orange line, which has $1,000, same conditions, only it's compounded daily. And we see that the jump isn't hugely significant. At the end of 30 years, this investment would be worth $4,481.23. So an extra $160. So it's not a huge jump over compounded annually. And what the lesson I want to sort of provide here is that any amount of compounding is great. And yearly, even though it doesn't seem like, well, compounded daily, I should get all that interest every day. That difference isn't huge over the course of 30 years. What really matters is that there's some amount of compounding, and even yearly, you see huge benefits in the investment.